Welcome back to Claymills. If you haven't seen part 1, this will make a lot more sense if you start there. I'll put a link on the screen. Last time we filled boiler number 1 right to the brim and pressurised it to £125 per square inch. It held the pressure, which is a massive step, but now the real test comes. We're about to have a visit from the boiler inspector, and if he doesn't like what he sees, this entire project could suffer a serious setback. If he finds something significant, it could stop it altogether. Boiler 1 has come a long way since we started its refurbishment at the beginning of the year. Here's Toby to explain the condition we found it in.
Have you seen any pictures of the amount of ash that was in it?
No.
On this one, we had 20 dumper loads out of tubes underneath and side flues. The tubes, I'm not kidding, half full, the length of the boiler.
Wow.
Underneath was probably a good 6 to 8 inches deep. Side flues were probably a good 6.
So it's been completely cleaned out then?
Yeah.
Through the hole?
I was the main one that dug this out.
Yeah.
I'll find you some pictures. I spent hours under there.
Boiler number 1 was stripped down at the beginning of 2025, before I arrived and started filming. So we don't have any video of the teardown, but we do have lots of pictures. And it was in a very sorry state. The stokers were fused solid with rust. Every moving part had seized. Over the following months, they were carefully dismantled. Original components were preserved wherever possible, but unfortunately, some of the drive shafts and moving parts were beyond repair. This, however, is not a problem at Claymills, because we're used to dragging things back from the brink. The majority of the equipment here hasn't been made for decades, so over the years we've machined new parts to replace ones that were completely worn out or corroded. We aim to return everything back to its original condition, and where possible we still use the original tools in the workshop, in exactly the same way the parts were originally made. The auto stokers were no exception, although we did use a modern milling machine and lathe to remake the drive shafts. Over the years, Lancashire boilers were used in all kinds of configurations. Originally, our boilers were hand-fired, like these shown at the Rye Hope Engines Museum. But as technology improved, different systems were retrofitted to make the boilerman's life easier and allow fewer people to do more work. The picture shown here is one of our boilermen in the 1920s. These are the original boilers which were installed when Claymills was built. In around 1908, they were fully modernised with Bennis chain grate stokers, which mechanised the firing process and made the boilers easier to run. According to our archives, however, those early stokers were somewhat problematic. So in the 1920s, they were upgraded again to a newer version made by Meldrum and Clayton, which are the ones we still have today. So when the old 1885 boilers were finally retired in 1936, the stokers weren't scrapped. They were removed, saved and fitted to the brand new boilers that replaced them. Which means although our boilers date from 1936, the stokers attached to them actually began life over a decade earlier. Because they were not originally designed for our current boilers, the clamps don't actually fit very well though. Here's Jacob.
Quite a bit of play between them.
Do they fit over the rivets or?
Yeah. Not really. You've got to remember all of this was designed for the original boilers and has been bodged onto these.
Okay. Because there were so many setups and options, everything was modular. So our stokers were carried on an adapter plate, which attaches to the front of the boiler with a series of clamps and hangers. This plate weighs around a tonne, and just to make life interesting, it won't fit through the boiler house door unless it's stood upright. So we're about to build a rig to move it safely. To do this, we need an angle plate. Claymills has a labyrinth of underground spaces that have all sorts of things stored in them. Today it becomes the backbone of our transport rig. We are going to switch to time-lapse now while we get the plate rigged for its journey back to the boiler house. With the plate safely rigged and ready to go, it was time to set off back to the boiler house.
Watch the wall. You need to go that way.
That's it. Yeah, I'm doing it. It only just fits.
It's a tight fit.
Well, if I get like right, this one they come. I'm watching. No, this is one that's in the corner. Pretty good at that.
And I mean, it's a tight fit.
We all breathed a sigh of relief once it had safely arrived. Now it's time to rig it again for the most difficult bit, the big lift back onto the boiler. We'll jump back into high speed while we do this. Because the lifting points in the boiler house are directly above the front of the boiler, we have to rig it with the second set of straps to prevent the plate from swinging forwards and crashing into the boiler front as we lift it from the transport cart. We took our time with all of this and gave it great care and consideration. The difference between a successful lift and a potential disaster is one poor decision, and if we were to damage the carrier plate today, it would be a huge job to replace it. Having a new piece cast would be extremely difficult and would stop this project in its tracks.
I think what you need is that little tapping stick.
Tap it out.
Alright. There's the LD, gravity is forcing, not with 9 in place.
Am I definitely going up here and not that? I am.
You can stop. You start going.
Take the trolley out.
Yeah. Can you?
You can't because that's what Andy's standing on. Right, wait there then, Ethan. Let Andy.
No, we need to keep going up. Just slowly. I'll do it for a minute.
I'm just going to wait like that.
Yes, you need to have some up there.
Add some up.
That middle.
Just need to go
Maybe in the
Well, gone up enough.
Just start gently going in a bit.
You want to go your way, Jacob? On that Up a little bit, Toby.
Wait there.
Right, I can take all this off now out of the way.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Start looking at that bloody central stump.
With the most dangerous part of the lift now done, we're going to jump back into high speed, because what followed was about 40 minutes of wrangling, jiggling and adjustment with pry bars and every other tool we could find. We tried everything, but we could not get the carrier plate to seat correctly on the boiler front. It's important that it's aligned correctly, because the stokers are belt driven from line shafting above, and they won't function properly if it isn't. We even put jacks under it to make sure that everything was aligned, but it still stubbornly refused to slide back. After exhausting all other options, and because this carrier plate is both cumbersome and not originally designed to be fitted to this boiler, we had no choice other than to resort to more persuasive measures.
I was thinking, have we got an extra sling we could...
You need to come round a bit then, Jacob.
Yeah.
Ready? Yeah. My hand. Oh, well done.
Oh,
that's it.
Not
moving at the top. Only got here, do we?
We have lifted it above our heads to hit it up there.
Why not? We can just slide it on Matt's shoulder.
He's got that on.
Ready?
Go on,
Bolts. Are we ready?
Yeah, we're watching bolts here.
Oh.
Let's go.
It's in it.
I think that's the back.
I think it's home at that, I think.
Okay.
Right, get that nut and washer on.
Done.
Well,
Little
that was
battering
technical.
ram.
I'll hold it, shall I?
Yeah, you hold it up.
Don't panic, I've got this. Right. Have you got that then?
Yeah, I've got that.
We'll take that out now then, shall we?
Can I take this jack out? Yeah.
Right, with the carrier plate now fitted, the next major milestone was the boiler inspector. This boiler hasn't made steam in over 50 years, so here's Jacob to explain.
Mainly what the boiler inspector was looking for initially was anywhere where we'd had bad water ingress. So this boiler house sat with no roof on it for 20 odd years, and down the side there where we caulked the insulation in down the edge, just below that level was where he was quite worried there was going to be some pitting, where the water had gone down, soaked the insulation and sat next to the boiler for 30 odd years. And he was also worried about the next level down, where the seating blocks were, so where the moisture had found the lowest point, sat there and merrily rotted it away. So he wanted to check there was nothing too severe. So all this brickwork from on the top had to come out, all the York stone, and then down underneath, one at a time, each of the seating blocks were taken out and assessed. And like you say, by removing all the masonry, he could see every rivet on the shell.
Yeah.
And all the inside was descaled, so we could see it all. I mean, we were quite lucky with this because it was never treated badly when it was working. It was just used and then laid up. Whereas if it had been sat and then used and sat and then used, we would have expected more corrosion on the water side. But really, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, mainly it was anywhere we could have gone. That was his concern. Anywhere where the boiler met some brickwork, that was that was where he wanted to see. He wanted to reveal that boiler plate underneath. And on the top, all the fittings had to come off, for the hydraulic mainly, because you can't pile enough weight on these safety valves to get them up to 120. And the crown valve needed to be renewed. Not because there was anything wrong with the original, but simply because it was cast iron. And the legislation states now that you can't use cast iron ones. So despite them being 150 years old and essentially nothing wrong with them, we've swapped to steel. And all that adapter is, that's just to take us from the modern metric PCD back to the imperial one on the swan neck. And like the change in all the bronze fittings, that's more something we've chosen to do, because we know from our experience on the others that we've had issues with fatigue cracks on them from the ammonia. So yeah, that's more us, but obviously he's in the loop for all of that anyway.
So where does the ammonia come from then?
So all the fittings on these boilers, ignoring that one, were off the original boilers fitted in 1885. And back then the engines were tallow lubricated, so I always say to people they're so old they predate steam oil.
Yeah.
So they were lubricated with tallow, but the feed water for the boilers was the condense from the engines. So the exhaust water from the engines was fed straight into the boilers. But obviously there was tallow in the feed water, and as you boil the water off, the tallow rots in the feed water and you get products of digestion. You get a little bit of methane, a little bit of ammonia, H2S coming off the feed water, and that ammonia was burrowing into the bronze and fatigue cracking it. And it's a fairly common problem on boilers that are absolutely ancient that had used tallow ruined feed water. Right. But tallow, I don't know what you'd say, polluted feed water. But these boilers have never seen that, but the fittings obviously have from years previous. And also the fact that the seats are 150 years old, that was they were about due.
Most of the boiler inspector's job is careful examination. It's a lot of time spent with torches and inspection mirrors. Serious stuff, but not very entertaining viewing. So here's the final part of his inspection.
He was telling me I'm not quite sure what he hated more, the back corner or welding those bosses in, because he preheated the plate from down here, warmed it and then crawled inside, and I think it was like welding the bosses in an oven. And when he went in there,
cooking himself.
Doing it in August probably wasn't the best idea. But, you know, kept him busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, kept him going. Loved every second of it.
I can well,
Yeah.
but like I say, it's done now.
It's done now, isn't it? Yeah.
So the job, right, that is half an hour.
About 4 tonne of coal in a weekend.
So very good. Yeah,
Right.
that's excellent. That.
With a clean bill of health, there's just time for a quick photo.
Oh, good.
Put that on my headstone.
With the shell now officially passed, we can start proving it's safe and start building it back into a working boiler again. Up till now, everything has been inspection, repair and preparation. From this point on, it starts to look like a machine again. Because a Lancashire boiler isn't just a steel shell, it's brickwork, flues, airflow and heat management. And without the bricks setting around it, it doesn't function at all. So from here, the rebuild really begins. When a Lancashire boiler is in steam, the hot gases from the fire don't just go straight to the chimney, they pass the boiler 3 times. The idea is simple: extract as much heat as possible before those gases finally leave through the flue. First, they travel down the 2 main furnace tubes to the back of the boiler. At the rear, they're turned downwards into the passage beneath the shell. From here, they run the full length underneath it, all the way back to the front. Then they split in 2. Half travels down the left-hand side flue and the other half down the right. Those are the passages Toby and Andy cleaned right at the start of this project. All that brickwork forms a gas path. We had to remove it wherever it touched the boiler shell so the inspector could see every inch of steel. Now it all has to go back. So over the coming episodes, we'll show you how this setting is rebuilt, how the stokers go back together, and how all of the pipework that feeds and controls this massive machine is refitted. Because passing the inspection was only half the battle, making steam again is the real goal. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. Claymills is run entirely by a charitable trust, and your support helps us continue our ongoing work. Once Boiler 1 is back in steam, we're going to start exploring this fascinating living window to the past, and we've got lots more projects just waiting their turn. So we'd be thrilled if you'd join us on our journey to keep this amazing place alive. See you again soon.